My father was a tradesman, a carpenter specifically. In exchange for pocket money, I would spend my summers kneeling in sawdust, assembling simple furniture, digging holes for posts and ferrying tools from van to site and back. I was always astounded at the number of tools required to do something like build a deck. A shovel to dig, a mixer for cement, screws, wood glue, varnish, and saws. Lots of saws. The instruments for cutting were built for specific purposes, visually and functionally distinct. I think about them often. The circular saw was broadly applicable, unlike the coping saw used for fine cuts for joinery. The reciprocating saw was used like a weapon from a slasher film, and the meter, heavy and unyielding, could cut through anything its master desired. A saw at its essence is a tool used to turn one thing into two things. But to a tradesman, each of these devices are built with specific tasks. My father was exact like that. This is a thing of purpose. It knows what it is capable of. We create inanimate objects with purpose in mind, but it's not until those purposes are changed, or not met, that we truly consider the implications of the objects in our hands, of what they really are, and what we need them for. Edmund Husserl is the philosopher commonly attributed with founding phenomenology, which, in layman's terms, is the study of lived experience. Not necessarily on what the world is objectively, but about what we see, hear, feel, and consider of the world. It's about how the world around us is presented to us, subjectively. Husserl believed that everything we experience, be it through vision, imagination, or memory, is directed. All acts and sensations have a target, so to speak. To use the example of looking at a tree, the person is directing their perceptions to the bark and foliage. When listening to a piece of music, we direct our experiences towards the sounds we hear. All conscious experience, Husserl believes, follows this pattern, that regardless of the thing we experience, or how we go about it, there is intention. Objects, which he would refer to as the matter of our perceptions, could not be understated in their importance. Our thoughts are so often directed to the inanimate, towards things, such as a set of keys, a car, or a tool. The things, the matter that we direct ourselves towards, are as monumental in our conscious experience as we are. They are the outward stimuli that we align this direction to. The final element that makes up the Husserlian model of experience is what he called the quality, which simply is what we in our minds are doing. Are we perceiving, doubting, hoping, wanting, and so on and on and on? We can see, remember, and dream of a tree. A nail can be measured, imagined, felt, or judged. All of these acts, internalized to ourselves, are the quality of an experience. Together, matter and quality make up the concept of intentionality, a cornerstone of phenomenology. Lived experiences are dictated not just by the things we do, but the things we do them to, and our intention towards them. I don't wish to drill too much deeper into phenomenology. The school of thought is a miasma of terminology and mind-breaking thought experiments. But for the purpose of this video, I'll be spending some time thinking about intentionality, about how choices of actions, the quality, shapes our experience. And I'd like to talk about the objects we don't think about, the ones that disappear in our minds, and the way we use and think about them, about the functions we prescribe them, and how they dictate how much of our mindscape belongs to them. How little we think of the banal inanimates, allowing our subconscious to bear the load of intentionality when the bricks lay neat and the sky remains blue. And how little we consider tools that serve their function. I think about them, the things for cutting, binding, polish, and joinery. I think about things for creating. And I also think about violence, and the things we use to do harm. They too hold little space in our cognitive load as action heroes gun down faceless henchmen. But every now and then, a weapon presents itself that I can't help but reflect on. One used impractically or unusually. It isn't until an object is used with an alternate intentionality, when the saw or sword is ripped from its preordained function, that I really look at the thing. My consciousness becomes truly directed at a weapon, enveloping me, when they are not used as intended. In No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy, we meet a man named Anton Chigurh. Chigurh is a killer for hire that exacts cold, indifferent violence to meet his goals. A study among psychiatrists regarding the depictions of psychopathy in media ranked Chigurh as the most honest and least sensationalized illustration, the personality disorder, beating out obvious exaggerations like the Joker and Hannibal Lecter. Chigurh does not laugh maniacally in the face of violence or use his lack of empathy as a springboard for anarchistic monologue. Instead, he approaches his journey through the novel with a philosophical stance that violence is just a thing one does, and that life is as inconsequential as any other thing that may be extinguished, and this is reflective in his weapon of choice. When cattle are slaughtered for meat, their arteries are cut and they are bled out. A specialized knife is used to cut major blood vessels in a process called sticking. It is a violent act, but thankfully, in most cases, the act is conducted humanely by stunning the animal, causing it to lose consciousness before the slaughter. The device used to stun these animals is a stun gun or a cattle bolt gun. It's a pneumatic chamber hooked to a piston and a trigger. When the trigger is pulled, compressed air shoots the piston at a high velocity, then retracts in an instant. A cattle, with the bolt placed against its head, is unaware of what is about to happen. Then in a flash faster than pain, the bolt is fired into the animal's brain, penetrating its thick skull and destroying 100,000 neurons, rendering the animal unconscious and unable to feel the dread of the sticking knife. This is the weapon of Chigurh. The first time we see him, he's shackled following an arrest, and uses his cuffs to messily dispose of a police officer. In this instance, the object of violence is literally bound to him. And when we see him use his stun gun, it is similarly incorporated into his personhood, the hose running along his sleeve to the gas tank, as though it were part of his arm. He pulls over a man, a civilian, and views him with the same indifference he would show to cattle. He places the piston to his skull, the man's eyes looking at it, confused. The pneumatic hiss and click of the plunger sounded like a door closing. The man slid soundlessly to the ground, a round hole in his forehead from which the blood bubbled and ran down his eyes, carrying with it his slow, uncoupling world visible to see. The stun gun is melded with Chigurh's identity, both with its incorporation as an extension of his body, as well as with his philosophy. This is a device used to dispose of life with the aim to feed humans. But Chigurh, there's no distinction between the flesh of man and the flesh of cattle. It is all meat, and the bolt gun is a quick and efficient method of turning life to meat. Chigurh himself does not find his weapon of choice novel. To him, the method of violence is inconsequential. Tools to him are distinguished only by their efficiency. But McCarthy presents us with a killer for hire, using a farming implementation to dispose of obstacles. The author wants us to look at this man, an aberration to morality, and question his methods. Why not use a more traditional tool for killing men? Reading No Country for Old Men, one can't help but become transfixed on the bolt gun as the coroners do. Unlike Chigurh, we do think a lot about this weapon. Our perceptions are as transfixed on the piston as much as the hole in the man's head. We are directed at the thing that is so melded with Chigurh's body and person. The idea of a tool as an extension of the self, and its absence in conscious experience, is a key idea in the philosophy of Husserl's student, Martin Heidegger. Heidegger introduces two concepts with regards to inanimate objects. He uses the analogy of a hammer in his examples. He states that in the hands of a master craftsman, A hammer does not hold space in their mind as they strike a nail into a board. It becomes an extension of their hand, arm, and self as they complete the ordained task. They don't think about it. In this instance, he calls the object ready at hand. It becomes a part of their body, ceasing to exist as its components. A tradesman barely perceives it as an object, let alone as a metal head and a wooden handle. It is simply part of the task. It doesn't fall under consideration. My father and Sugar were masters of their tools. The hammer and bolt gun ceased to exist as separate entities when used for their purpose. The hose, canister, bolt, and piston are not considered by the hitman that wields it, nor does he consider the rifling barrel, chamber, or trigger of a shotgun. When ready at hand, they disappear from their mind and become an essential part of the intentionality of the wielder. The object and task, the matter and quality, become inseparable. The second concept, which Heidegger called present at hand, is the antithesis of this. The tradesman's hammer, as stated, does not exist as an amalgamation of parts. That is until it breaks. If the head falls off a hammer as it strikes a nail, it invades the conscious experience where it was once ethereal. Suddenly, the hammer does exist as its parts. It still exists, but it now becomes an object that even the most skilled hands and minds must think about. It's no longer part of the subconscious experience. The tradesman is directed towards it, as Husserl would state. The broken tool must be measured and quantified, assessed for repair, and rotated in the mind. Whereas before it just was. In this instance, the amount of mental effort granted to the object is monumental compared to moments ago when it was fit for its function. Broken tools are the common analogy that Heidegger uses when considering the cognitive load granted to objects. But it's not just broken things that this applies to. I would argue that this consideration, the present at handness of broken hammers that require so much of our mental load, applies too to the objects used outside of their prescribed task or environment. The stun gun is an extension of Sugar, but to us, it's an invasion into our world. It's an insult that degrades our humanity to livestock. To the player in Portal, the gun is a tool for traversal, defense, and creativity. To GLaDOS, when it exits the testing chamber, it is a reappropriated tool used to tear down all she knows. These things are fit for purpose. Completing tasks outside of that purpose is foreign. We've imparted an idea onto these objects, what Husserl would call a nominal essence, a prescribed meaning, a definition we gave it on creation. McCarthy writes in the novel during a particularly famous scene, "Anything can be an instrument," Sugar said. Small things, things you wouldn't even notice. They pass from hand to hand, people don't pay attention. And then one day there's an accounting, and after that, nothing is the same. Well, you say, it's just a coin, for instance. Nothing special there. What could that be an instrument of? You see the problem? To separate the act from the thing, as if the parts of some moment in history might be interchangeable with the parts of some other moment. How could that be? Well, it's just a coin, yes, it's true. Is it? To separate the act from the thing, the quality from the matter, or the head from the grip. These are the instances in which an object is dragged to the forefront of our experiences. When a man is killed on screen with a gun, we pay it no mind. An instrument serves the function we give it. But a stun gun is not for us. It's worthwhile thinking about and trying to understand Sugar. It's not like a dagger. Not like a ballistic missile. It's not like a sword. On August 19th, 2025, Giant Squid Studios released Sword of the Sea, a short, contemplative game about reintroducing the ocean to places devoid of life. The story is told through ancient tablets and lore drops. I've never been good at piecing these things together. and this is not a lore video. Instead, I want to talk about how the game uses an inanimate object in a novel, intentional way. One where a weapon transcends its purpose and becomes present at hand, impossible not to think about, via its use outside of its essential function. I'd like to talk about the game's sword. It's fucking hover sword. Sword of the Sea sees you take control of the Wraith, a statue come to life with a natural talent for grinding, taking air, and generally shredding. With your hover sword under your feet, you take to the sands of this world to reintroduce water to the ecosystem, do kickflips, and revive marine life in one of the most beautiful games I have ever played. Water and sand are the binary opposites we first experience in the game. A droplet of water falls on the Wraith, granting it consciousness as it stands in a half-buried room. One of the first lore stones in the game reads like this. Rock stands and water flows, so it ever must be. And as it is crushing to rock to make it flow and rush, so it is cruel to water to hold it still. And it's right. It's not in the nature of sand and rock to flow like waves, rivers, and tributaries. Rock is rigid and unyielding. Water is adaptable and lively. But I'm not interested in water and sand. Not really. But it is interesting that the first thing we learn, the first peek into the lost wisdom of this world, is about the essence of inanimate objects. To rigidly state that the behaviour of these things are, well, set in stone. The oldest swords we've discovered date back to roughly 3000 BCE, the Bronze Age. They are called the swords of Arslan-Tep, an ancient city in what is now Turkey. Looking at the weapons now, it's difficult to find a particularly strong distinction between those of 5 millennia ago and the swords that live in our mind's eye. The materials have changed and the components refined, but these are tools for enacting harm, made of a handle, crossguard, blade, and pommel. Very little has changed. And the purpose of a sword never changed. It adopted it from its predecessor, the dagger. These things are tools for violence, not as efficient as Shugur's bolt gun or shotgun. But they have a function, a nominal essence that we and history have prescribed to it. For us, nothing is different. We know what to do with a sword. However, that is not the case for the Wraith. Upon their awakening, the being we control does not see the blade as a tool for creating meat from life. It mounts the blade like a surfboard and embarks on its journey, through naivete, ignorance, or a willful rejection of violence. The Sword of the Sea is reappropriated into a thing built to create, to reintroduce life to the landscape. And it does so magnificently. We're given the opportunity to glide over stone. And even when we succeed partially in our mission, we glide like this was always what this thing was for. Like this tool was never built for killing. That this blade's only function was to glide among the dolphins. The quality and matter have been upended here. The act and the thing have been separated. And the sword, no longer a thing for blood making, is part of our conscious experience. To us, the player, it is present at hand, at least for a while. When playing the game, I would come back to this unusual use of a weapon that I'd so often wielded in the virtual world, but not like this. Through my first playthrough, I was more concerned with the sword than the Wraith. I wanted to know what would happen to it. Would it have the ending it deserved? I thought about the sword more than any other I've experienced in games, film, or literature. My thoughts around the sword were consumed by Husserlian intentionality. But to the Wraith? No. To the Wraith, this thing is serving its function perfectly. It soars through the air and over sand and water seamlessly. An extension of its user. Both the Wraith and Shugur have weapons ready at hand, but in wonderfully contrasted manners. Not long into the game, we come across another being that looks like us, wielding a similar sword. When they met, I gasped. For the first time, our protagonist, learning from another, wielded the sword, outstretched in defense. They lock eyes for a moment as life returns to the temple, and the red wraith mounts the blade like us and takes off. As I said, I'm not one for digging into lore and implications, but what I saw in this scene was a meeting of two beings, one of violence and one of peace. And thankfully, peace and harmony came out better for it. The two wraiths travel together. They dance amid the waves in joyous rapture as water, life, and colour return to the world. The music swells as great sharks guide us together, and it seems like not only will we save this world, but we will do it together. But unfortunately, the ending to Sword of the Sea, to me anyways, is bittersweet. Don't get me wrong, we succeed in our mission. The world is saved, clouds and rain are reintroduced from the heavens, and our friend is freed from the jaws of the terrible serpent that wants to thwart us. But it made me sad. I wasn't sad when the wraiths fell from the sky, their mission completed and their hands separated symbolically, or when we extinguished the light in our eyes and transcended from this realm. And I wasn't sad as I watched our companion ride alone as the credits rolled. My sadness came from our victory, not in its effect, but how we achieved it. The climax of the game occurs as we face down the titanic serpent of rock and flame, the true antagonist, a being that shattered our own blade and captured our friend. In a whirlwind of a chase, we deflect its attacks, expose its weak points. The waves guide us through adversity towards victory, until in a crescendo of adrenaline and fury, we kill it. We drive our sword where it is meant to go, and the beast falls from the sky. We did it. The Sword of the Sea. Well, it was a sword all along. In our final moments, it served the function it was made for. Rock stands strong, water flows, and swords fell beasts. I've thought about that moment a lot, poring over the morality of it in my mind. It feels like a betrayal to me, to use our inanimate companion this way. It just feels wrong. But therein lies my favourite thing about this game. Sword of the Sea gives us a weapon, and creates such a wonderful, joyous experience in using it, that it is jarring when it is used for violence. Anton Chigurh's bolt gun is bastardized in its use against people. The Sword of the Sea is insulted in being used against anything. The sword is an object that is ready at hand outside of its historical function. It's most natural when it's gliding. I've never thought about a weapon like this before. I allowed it to nestle into my mind as a means of transportation. I allowed my curiosity its free rein. But strangely, I never thought about this weapon more than when it was used exactly as designed.